Arab leaders approve a reconstruction plan for Gaza as the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas hangs in the balance. Hello, I'm Anand. This is The Heat. Arab leaders meeting in Cairo unanimously adopted Egypt's plan to rebuild Gaza without relocating some 2 million Palestinians. The plan, presented by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, calls for the removal of unexploded ordnance, the clearing of more than 50 million tons of rubble, and building sustainable green housing over the next 5 years. We begin our coverage with this report from CGTN's Adel Makrouki in Cairo.
Egypt wants Arab leaders, the United Nations, the European Union and African Union to support its comprehensive reconstruction plan for Gaza. The proposal would involve removing the rubble and rebuilding damaged homes for millions of displaced Palestinians. It also includes forming a transitional governance committee until the Palestinian Authority returns.
This committee will supervise the aid process and temporarily manage the enclave's affairs. This is to prepare for the return of the Palestinian Authority to the enclave. Egypt is also keen to train Palestinian security caliber who will be tasked to maintain security there. In parallel, this plan must be accompanied by a peace track that aims for a fair, comprehensive, and sustainable settlement for the Palestinian crisis.
As part of the Egyptian plan, temporary housing units will be constructed to ensure Palestinians are not displaced outside Gaza. Meanwhile, at a summit on Tuesday in the new administrative capital, Egypt called on all sides involved in the conflict to reach a truce to end the fighting.
This summit is an important signal that the world has a collective responsibility to support efforts to end this war, relieve profound human suffering, and secure lasting peace. We must avoid at all costs the resumption of hostilities that would plunge the millions back into an abyss of suffering and further destabilize the region. And simultaneously, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Lebanon and Syria must be respected. Serious negotiations for the ceasefire in all its facets must be resumed without delay.
Cairo's 121-page draft proposal included AI-generated visuals of how Gaza would look like years from now. Beach resorts, a seaport, and comprehensive economic construction are part of the plan. Egypt estimates the reconstruction of Gaza can be completed by the year 2030.
The only contradiction between Egypt's plan and Trump's is that it totally rejects migrating Palestinians away from the enclave. President Donald Trump didn't want Hamas to control Gaza. The plan Egypt announced aims at making the Palestinian Authority take control of the enclave. The U.S. president wants to establish peace in the Middle East. Egypt's plan also seeks to achieve that by establishing a Palestinian state that peacefully coexists next to Israel. If the U.S. and Arabs cooperate based on this plan, they can reach the peace which they all desire.
Almost all participants have endorsed the Egyptian plan. They believe that the establishment of an independent Palestinian state is the only way to ensure lasting peace. In April, Egypt will be hosting an international Gaza reconstruction conference to raise finances for its 5-year, $53 billion vision for Gaza. Adel Makrouki, CGTN, from the new administrative capital of Egypt.
For more now on the reconstruction plan for Gaza, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Maryland is Dan Arbell. He's a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. Also with us from Washington, D.C., Khalil Sayegh is a political analyst and co-founder and president of the Agora initiative. From Riyadh, Salman Al-Ansari is a geopolitical analyst. And Mohamed Higazy is a former ambassador and former Egyptian assistant foreign minister. He joins us from Cairo. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Ambassador Higazy, let me start with you. So here we have this plan presented by the Egyptian president. It's worth $56 billion. It was unanimously adopted by this meeting that took place in Cairo. Let's listen to some of what Egyptian President Al-Sisi had to say.
لقد آن الأوان The time has come to adopt the launch of a serious and effective political process that leads to a just and lasting solution to the Palestinian issue in accordance with the resolutions of international legitimacy. I am convinced that President Trump is capable of doing so in light of our sincere desire to put an end to tension and hostilities in our region.
So, Ambassador, this is a response to President Trump's plan to expel all Palestinians from Gaza and build a vacation resort in the territory right now. But the 5-year plan that we heard about today, I mean, that calls for sustainable housing, green housing, also for an airport and a fishing and commercial port. It's very ambitious. How realistic is this plan? And right now, Israel is the controlling authority in Gaza. Wouldn't it need the permission of Israel to start construction?
Well, this is a very important movement, and this is a comprehensive plan put by Egypt, supported by Palestine, and today by all Arab countries. This workable plan will be definitely presented to our partners, being it the United States or Europe or elsewhere. It is open to negotiation, but it is related also to the current agreement, which we are following, the ceasefire agreement. In its second phase, the withdrawal of the Israeli troops will allow the reconstruction to start. So it is very realistic and very much connected to the current situation. However, it answers many challenges that we are facing, including the day after. It's a day after with a Palestinian-led expert committee, or what we call it, the social support unit, that is composed of Palestinians, technocrats that will run Gaza during the immediate and construction campaign. And it will allow, at the beginning, Egypt to call for an international conference for reconstruction of Gaza, which has been destroyed for 5 times now. And that's why the third party of the previous agreement, or the existing agreement of the ceasefire, is calling for a political horizon, which in our case, the 2-state solution, which will make the construction sustainable and the peace available to all who wants to join in.
Salman Al-Ansari, Saudi Arabia called a meeting that was last week to discuss this alternative to Trump's plan, which I mentioned earlier. What is Saudi Arabia's view of this proposal that was adopted in Cairo, and what role, if any, will the kingdom play in this reconstruction effort?
Yeah, thank you so much, Anand, and hi to your honorable guests and to all the viewers of CGTN. Yeah, to answer your question, as you can see, that the crisis in Gaza, I think, is not just a regional issue. It's a test of the world's commitment to justice and stability. The aftermath and the killing of the 65,000 people, half of whom are women and children, is horrendous and unimaginable. If international law is to mean anything, it must be applied equally, not selectively. And I think the Arab message led by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan has been very clear. And I paraphrase and summarize the Arab message by saying peace is not possible without justice, and justice is not possible without a homeland for, obviously, the Palestinians. So I think after reading the statement of the Arab League plan, it was actually very clear that they did not want to get into a position where they only and solely speak about Gaza. They were speaking about Palestine. They were speaking about the West Bank. They were speaking about the horrendous actions of Israel against the Palestinians. So Saudi Arabia is definitely in complete support of Egypt and of this meeting, and also for the great alternative project and plan by the Arabs that have been internationalized by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who supported it completely. And I personally know that there are some people who have some kind of contentions with regards to what's going to happen to Hamas, what's going to happen to the whole issue. But here's the thing: personally, I and most of the Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, view Hamas and Iranian-backed militias as part of the problem. We have to agree about that. But, however, at the same time, these militias exist as symptoms of a deeper issue, which is the Israeli occupation. Israel has directly and indirectly, as we all know, it's no secret, has directly and indirectly aided these militias to deepen Palestinian divisions and to undermine the two-state solution. These are the facts, and I think Prime Minister Netanyahu's, I would like to use the analogy of swimming. Netanyahu's government does not want Hamas to sink nor to swim, but rather to float. So the existence of Hamas is not the problem of Netanyahu, but it's mostly the Palestinians who are living in Gaza and in the West Bank. So the actual real plan is displacement, which the Arabs have completely rejected, and Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and all the other Arab countries have completely rejected any form of displacement, because displacement is actually a euphemism for ethnic cleansing under the United Nations international law. So you cannot just ask people to leave their homeland because you cannot coexist with them and because you deprive them from their actual rights. So that's why I say uprooting Hamas has never been Netanyahu's policy. Instead, his government has focused on uprooting Palestinian citizens all at once, either by bombing them or displacing them, or by both. And that's going to be rejected by everyone.
Khalil, Sayegh, what do you make of that point about a possible future role for Hamas? Surely any group that would represent the Palestinians would have to be determined after an election, wouldn't they? And if Hamas wins that election, well, then they are the rulers.
Sure, yeah. I mean, before election, I mean, Hamas rules Gaza today. This is a de facto situation where Israel was able really to harm the capabilities of Hamas when it comes to really harming Israel, but it did not diminish its ability to govern Gaza. We've seen Hamas's fighters re-emerging in Gaza. Hamas continue to control the security apparatus in Gaza. They have the weapons. They have the monopoly over weapons and extend in Gaza. They control all sort of institutions within Gaza. Yeah. Today, before the summit, Hamas made a statement in which they said that the disarming of Hamas is a red line for them that they wouldn't even discuss with the Arab states. Yeah. And I think that's the Hamas position. So even before we get to election, where Hamas could win and Hamas could lose, or Hamas could lose, I think that the de facto situation today on the ground, Hamas controls Gaza, and there is no plan out of that.
Okay, Khalil, let's get back to this plan that was approved in Cairo. It has significant backing. It has the backing of the United Nations. We had the UN Secretary General at the meeting. It also has the backing of the European Union. The Palestinian Authority President, Mahmoud Abbas, he was at the meeting as well. He addressed the leaders there. This is some of what he had to say. Let's listen.
We emphasize the importance of assigning the Arab Islamic Ministerial Committee to make contacts and visits to various capitals, including the U.S. administration, to explain the Arab plan for reconstruction in Gaza, with the presence of its people in Gaza, and to ensure that the Palestinian Authority assumes its civil, security, and political functions in Gaza.
So there again, Khalil, we had no mention of Hamas, but you know, as I said, it has the approval of the United Nations and the European Union, but most importantly, it would require the approval of the United States, wouldn't it? I mean, couldn't President Trump veto this?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that the Trump administration has, for 2 times, proposed a deal to the Palestinians that is unacceptable, that violates all previous agreements. The first in his first term, with what's so-called the deal of the century, and the second this time with suggesting that we need to ethnic cleanse Gaza completely in order to not have Hamas there. That's the kind of proposal Trump have proposed. We're not sure if this proposal will have ears in the White House yet. However, I think it all depends on the big question would be, how would they deal with Hamas? Again, this is the elephant in the room. Everyone is trying to avoid not to clash with the Arab public and not to clash with Hamas in Gaza as well. But I think if you are going to convince, in order to convince the American administration, you need to clearly state how you're going to deal with the security question. And it's something that, by the way, President Abbas alluded to, where he says that the Palestinian Authority will have the full security control. And if he means the full security control, it means Hamas cannot have arms in Gaza.
Dan Arbell, could reconstruction begin? Could Gaza be rebuilt absent any kind of political settlement?
Anand, this is, the plan that was adopted this today is comprehensive, as one of the speakers said, and it includes important elements. The fact, though, is that the elephant in the room, Hamas, has not been addressed. And as long as Hamas is in control of Gaza, as long as Hamas calls the shots, as long as Hamas exists in its current form, then nothing will move forward. There will not be reconstruction, rehabilitation, stabilization without dealing, grabbing the bull by its horns and dealing with Hamas once and for all. Hamas needs to give up its weapons. Hamas cannot be part of the equation. And unfortunately, this plan is, efforts have been put to this plan to make this plan work, and kind of negate, or at least push to the sides Trump's proposal for evacuation of Gaza, but it doesn't address the real problem here. And without dealing with the issue of Hamas, then I just don't see this plan taking off. How will the Palestinian Authority operate inside Gaza? Will Arab countries even be willing to send people, policing units, stabilization agencies to work on the ground there, as long as Hamas is there and in control? So, I think that before a political solution, we need to address the issue of Hamas, and without that, then this whole plan and all these ideas and this substantive funding of $56 billion that has been envisioned for this, just simply will go down the drain, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, Dan, well, let's look at the situation right now. I mean, the ceasefire is holding for now very, very tenuously. In fact, it's in jeopardy right now because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has changed the terms of the ceasefire that he signed, unilaterally changed that. Let's listen to what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say.
Israel has accepted President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff's plan to extend the temporary ceasefire by 50 days. During that time, we can discuss the conditions for a permanent ceasefire that will end the war in Gaza. In Witkoff's plan, half of the hostages would be released right away, and the remaining half would be released if we reach an agreement on a permanent ceasefire. Again, Israel has accepted this plan, I accepted this plan, but so far, Hamas has rejected it.
So, Dan, here we have a situation where the Prime Minister has changed the terms of that agreement that he signed. He's talking about a permanent ceasefire, which is part of phase 2 of that ceasefire agreement. I mean, what happens next?
So I think that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is supposed to arrive in the region in the coming days to meet with the different parties, meaning with Israel, with the Egyptians, the Qataris, who are the mediators, and see what elements in his plan can actually be implemented. I think that certainly Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to reconfigure this whole process and change it to Israel's advantage, and it seems to be getting the support from the Trump administration, but it will depend on Witkoff's conversations once he arrives in the region and where that will go. Whether, and certainly, Witkoff can come up with a plan, but if Hamas rejects that plan, then, it's going to be a problem in implementation. I think this is where the mediators need to come in and put pressure on Hamas to accept some of the elements. But certainly, this is all hanging in the air, while Israel has also signaled that if, release of hostages does not continue, then we may see the war resume within another week or so.
Ambassador Higazy, as we can hear, this plan, as good as its intentions are, is fraught with complications. Some of those complications being what happens to Hamas. Is there any role for Hamas afterwards? Who controls Gaza? What about stabilizing that particular territory? I mean, wouldn't there have to be some kind of agreement with Israel so that this reconstruction could take place and we don't have a situation where Israel resumes bombing the territory and destabilizing it again?
Well, again, it's good that we will wait for Steve Witkoff to come and show up his plan. We are hearing from Netanyahu what Witkoff is suggesting. Let us hear it from him. Let him also react to the Arab plan, which has answers to all. Even the day after in Gaza, Hamas has accepted to step out of the political scenery, and a technical committee of experts will take over the running of the Gaza Strip during the reconstruction phase, in which Egypt and Jordan will support the Palestinian police that will be put and drafted from the group of policemen who didn't leave the Gaza Strip after 2007 and remain in the Strip. So we will also call for the international community and the UN to consider a contingent of peacekeepers in both Gaza and the West Bank. And this is a very important element in answering the question of security and who will run Gaza Strip.
Yeah,
Talking about
Ambassador,
disarming.
Yeah, Ambassador, just one point on security there. You know, what happens to Hamas? Hamas has said that they will not be disarmed. They want to retain their arms after any kind of settlement. And as Dan Arbell told us, this is something that the Israelis are not going to accept.
Well, Israelis has to accept that this is an occupied territory.
Yeah.
And the rationale of having Hamas or any resistant group in the present or in the future, being it Hamas or any other group that will appear, will be driven by the mere fact that the whole cause of this problem is occupation. The occupation of Israel that gives the justification of all what you see that you call resistance. And if you may recall with me, the Good Friday Agreement, the light at the end of the tunnel of the Irish problem is that give the IRA the handing over their armament to the UN. So you need to give an end of the occupation, a light at the end of the tunnel, so that you can talk about disarming Hamas. However, the Palestinian Authority said that they will unite, and they call for a uniting of the arms under their auspices, and this is maybe the new army of the independent Palestinian state.
Khalil Sayegh, the United States Secretary of State, he has talked with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the U.S. says that it will now expedite the delivery of $4 billion in arms. Now, at this stage, it's unclear whether the United States still supports phase 2 of the ceasefire deal. That's the phase in which they will be talking about a permanent ceasefire. I mean, at this stage, it looks like the United States agrees with Israel, with the Prime Minister, that there needs to be an extension to the ceasefire that currently exists. What do you make of that?
I think we all have to get used to Trump's sort of style in negotiating and sort of conversation. He doesn't follow sort of the classic diplomatic approach toward anything. I mean, look at what he's doing with Ukraine and the conversation he had with Zelensky and others. So it's quite normal for Trump to just get into something and then blow out. And I think that's the nature of how it looks like. Yeah. Yes, it's like today that they walked back of their commitment to phase 2. I think they are fully backing Netanyahu. And I think this sends the wrong message to the Arab world, and the rhetorics are quite dangerous, because what Netanyahu is ultimately interested in is either ethnic cleansing Gaza completely or just leaving it as it is without reconstruction or allowing to any sort of even hope for Palestine.
Salman, Al-Ansari, you know, one of the big goals for the United States is to see some kind of normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, to the establishment of diplomatic relations. But Saudi Arabia has, in the past, made it clear, and it made it clear several times, that it is not going to consider that unless there are serious negotiations towards a two-state solution. So where does Saudi Arabia go to from here?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Look, there are two major views which can be imagined on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 represents a two-state solution. 10 represents Israeli normalization with the Arab and the wider Muslim world, 57 countries. The Arabs want to start from number 1, which is two-state solution, to move toward number 10, which is normalization. However, the current Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, wants to start from number 10 and move backward. Or perhaps they don't even consider number one to be an option, which is a very problematic problem. The Arabs see the solution in the two-state solution, and Netanyahu sees and views the two-state solution as the two-state delusion. So we do have a problem of perspective here. And the Arab position, led primarily by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan, is not only based on moral principles, even though it's a big thing, but also on realism and realpolitik. The idea that security can be built on the ruins of another's home is not just flawed. It's a recipe for permanent instability. So I think the Israeli public has been widely deceived by its extreme right-wing government, which promotes the idea that peace can only be achieved by killing the two-state solution and waging endless wars against Palestinians and neighbors.
Okay, I've just got just over a minute left, and I want to get to Dan Arbell on this. Dan, you know, if this plan, this Arab summit plan, if it is to be implemented, if it is to be successful, then wouldn't there have to be a far greater and broader settlement in the Middle East in terms of security for all the countries involved, as well as some move towards a two-state solution?
Yes, I personally believe so, but I think that the current Israeli government is certainly in opposition to any notion of two states. And I think it will require, moving towards two states will require a different kind of government in Israel, a different kind of governing coalition, with parties who are willing to support that. Still, I would say that Israeli public opinion post-October 7th is much more against it than it was before that. And it's going to require education and a process of convincing people of the viability and the importance of doing this, because right now there is no majority that supports that notion. But definitely part of a stable Middle East and a security among moderate Sunni Arab states and Israel and the Palestinians, and I think it's important to move toward the two-state solution.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.